It's 3:17 a.m. The world outside is a void, no cars, no voices, just the hum of silence pressing against your skull. You're awake, but not by choice. Something has dragged you out of sleep, a thought so sharp it feels like a blade twisting in your ribs. Maybe it's the ghost of a regret, a fear you've buried for years, or the crushing weight of a question you've been too afraid to ask. What if I've been lying to myself this whole time? In this hour, there are no distractions. No texts, no meetings, no carefully curated social media feeds to numb the unease. It's just you, raw, exposed, staring into the abyss of your own mind. And the abyss stares back. This is the 3 a.m. test, the moment when the illusions you've built to survive the daylight crumble, and what's left is the unvarnished truth. But here's the paradox. Why does the mind wait until the darkest hour to speak its deepest truths? During the day, you are a master of deflection. You rationalize, you distract, you perform. You tell yourself you're fine, that your doubts are exaggerations, that your fears are irrational. But at 3 a.m., the defenses fall. The ego, tired from its daily performance, loosens its grip. And in that space, something older, wiser, and far more unsettling rises to the surface. What if these thoughts aren't your enemy? What if they're the key to a freedom you've never allowed yourself to imagine? We spend our lives running from discomfort. We medicate it, mute it, drown it in noise. But what if the very thoughts we suppress, the ones that surface in the dead of night, are not curses, but messages? The fear that you're wasting your life. The gnawing suspicion that the path you're on is someone else's. The quiet, relentless voice that whispers, there is more. And you know it. These are not random misfires of an anxious brain. They are the echoes of a deeper intelligence, one that refuses to be silenced by the daylight world of obligations and appearances. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of ourselves we exile because it's too painful, too dangerous, too real. But what if confronting it is the only way to true liberation? Think of the last time you woke up at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding. What was it trying to tell you? That you're living a lie? That you've outgrown the person you pretend to be? That the cost of your comfort is your soul? This is the great contradiction of human existence. We crave security, yet we wither without truth. We build prisons of routine, then wonder why we feel trapped. And the only time we're forced to confront this is when the world is asleep, and there's nowhere left to hide. But here's where it gets unsettling. Most people hate this hour. They'll do anything to escape it, scroll mindlessly, pop a sleeping pill, drown it out with exhaustion. Because facing what lurks in the silence feels like staring into an abyss. Yet history's most profound thinkers, artists, and revolutionaries didn't run from the abyss. They stepped into it. Nietzsche wrote, when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. But he didn't say that to warn us, he said it to summon us. What if 3 a.m. isn't your tormentor, but your most honest teacher? What if the thoughts that scare you are the exact ones you need to hear? And what if, just what if, freedom isn't found in silencing them, but in finally listening? But before you can listen, you must understand why these thoughts surface at all. Why does the mind rebel in the dark? What force is at work here, one so powerful it bypasses all your defenses? The answer lies in a hidden war, one raging inside you every moment, between the self you've constructed and the self you've buried alive. You are not supposed to be awake at this hour. Biologically, culturally, psychologically, 3 a.m. exists outside the sanctioned rhythm of human life. It is a temporal no man's land where the mind, stripped of its daytime armor, begins to whisper secrets you've spent a lifetime avoiding. But why? Why does truth emerge only when the world is asleep? The answer lies in a conspiracy of silence, a pact we've all unconsciously made to keep the most dangerous parts of ourselves locked away. From the moment we learn to speak, we are taught to edit. A child's raw honesty, "Why is that person fat?" or "I don't love you anymore," is swiftly corrected. We learn to mask, to perform, to say the acceptable thing rather than the true thing. By adulthood, this conditioning is so complete that we no longer recognize the act. We believe the performance is who we are. But the subconscious never forgets. Freud called this repression, the mind's way of burying what it cannot afford to feel. Jung took it further. What we refuse to face doesn't disappear, it becomes the shadow, a psychic prison for every disowned desire, fear, and truth. And like any prisoner, it rattles the bars when the guards aren't looking. At 3 a.m., the guards are asleep. Neuroscience confirms what the poets have always known: the night mind is a different creature. As your brain cycles through theta waves, the threshold between sleep and waking, the default mode network, the system responsible for self-reflection, memory, and identity, fires with unusual intensity. This is why, in the dead of night, past regrets feel like open wounds. Future anxieties play like horror films. The question, "What am I doing with my life?" lands like a gut punch. During the day, the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of rationalization, can suppress these intrusions. But at 3 a.m., the CEO is off duty. The primal, emotional brain takes the wheel. This isn't malfunction. This is design. Your mind is trying to show you what you've been too busy to see. Now we arrive at the heart of the problem: society rewards the lie. Viktor Frankl observed that modern humanity suffers not from material poverty, but from meaninglessness, a starvation of purpose we try to numb with consumption, achievement, and distraction. But the hunger remains. Sartre called this bad faith, the act of pretending we have no choice in our own imprisonment. We cling to hollow routines, unfulfilling relationships, and borrowed ambitions because the alternative, confronting the void, feels like madness. But at 3 a.m., the facade cracks. The questions that surface aren't random. They are symptoms of a life untruthful to itself. Why do I feel like a stranger in my own life? When did I stop believing in my own dreams? Who would I be if I wasn't afraid? These aren't attacks. They are revolutions. The war of two selves inside you. There are two entities at war, the persona shaped by expectations, traumas, and survival strategies. It wants safety, approval, and the illusion of control. The uncensored, undomesticated core of who you are. It wants truth, expansion, and liberation at any cost. By day, the constructed self rules. By night, the essential self stages a coup. This is why 3 a.m. thoughts feel so violent. They are the uprising of a soul that refuses to be buried alive. Most people respond to this internal revolt in one of two ways: the suppressor, they gaslight themselves. This is just anxiety. I'll feel better in the morning. They smother the flames with sleeping pills, alcohol, or compulsive scrolling. The escapist, they romanticize the angst. Life is meaningless anyway. They mistake cynicism for wisdom, never realizing it's just fear in a trench coat. But there is a third way. What if, instead of fearing the 3 a.m. truth, you leaned into it? What if the thoughts that terrify you are not enemies, but guides, whispering the exact words you need to hear? The way out is not around the darkness, but through it. And those who dare to listen discover something extraordinary on the other side. The tragedy is not that we hear the whispers at 3 a.m. The tragedy is that we spend our entire lives pretending we didn't. Every time you hit snooze on those nocturnal revelations, every time you dismiss them as just overthinking, you aren't avoiding discomfort. You are amputating a part of your soul. The consequences of this self-betrayal ripple outward, warping your psychology, your relationships, and your very perception of reality. This is how the cycle works. Imagine a man who wakes up at 3 a.m. with the crushing realization, "I hate my job." By sunrise, he's already rationalizing, "It's not so bad. The money's good. Everyone feels this way." Repeat this for 10 years. What was once a quiet whisper becomes a scream he can no longer hear, because he's trained himself into deafness. This is how people become ghosts in their own lives, not through one dramatic act of self-abandonment, but through thousands of tiny surrenders. Nietzsche warned of this: become what you are. Fail to do so, and you live as a walking contradiction, a being divided against itself. The psychological term is cognitive dissonance, but the human experience is far more visceral. It's the sensation of being trapped behind glass, watching your life happen to someone else. Here's the cruel joke: the more you suppress your 3 a.m. truths, the more they control you. The unacknowledged fear of failure morphs into chronic procrastination. The unprocessed grief becomes depression wearing a mask of stress. The denied longing for freedom expresses itself as explosive anger at trivial things. Your subconscious is a master of disguise. It will smuggle unmet needs into your life as self-sabotage, addiction, or unexplained physical pain. Freud called this the return of the repressed. What you refuse to confront consciously will manifest destructively in other ways. Modern research confirms it: unexpressed emotions don't disappear. They go underground, reshaping your biology, stress hormones, inflammation, and your behavior, passive aggression, people-pleasing. The mind-body price of silence is astronomical. This isn't just a personal crisis. It's a cultural pandemic. We live in a society that rewards dissociation. Hustle culture glorifies burnout as virtue. Social media turns authenticity into a performance. The pharmaceutical industry pathologizes normal human despair as chemical imbalances. Aldous Huxley saw this coming: people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. We've built a world where it's easier to numb than to feel, to distract than to reflect. The result? A civilization of sleepwalkers, people who mistake the absence of pain for aliveness. The ultimate cost of ignoring your 3 a.m. self is this: you lose access to your own will. Jean-Paul Sartre insisted that we are our choices. But when you habitually override your deepest knowing, you aren't making choices, you're repeating conditioned responses. Over time, this erodes your capacity for volition itself. You become a marionette: your career path, a series of shoulds inherited from parents or society. Your relationships, negotiations between fear of loneliness and fear of vulnerability. Your daily life, an elaborate distraction from the one question that matters: is this really my life, or am I just performing it? This is why midlife crises happen, not because people suddenly realize they're mortal, but because they finally face the unlived life within them. You now stand at a crossroads: continue the charade, keep hitting snooze on your soul. The price? A life of quiet desperation, punctuated by increasingly desperate attempts to silence the inner voice, affairs, midlife sports cars, spiritual bypassing. Begin the rebellion. Treat your 3 a.m. thoughts not as intruders, but as delegates from your truest self. If you choose the second path, know this: the way forward isn't through analysis, but through courage. The solution isn't to fix your 3 a.m. thoughts. It's to let them break you open. In the next section, we'll dismantle the prison, not with tools of suppression, but with weapons far more potent: radical honesty, existential responsibility, and the terrifying freedom of becoming who you already are. The alarm bells have been ringing for years. You felt them, those 3 a.m. moments when the veil thins and something primal within you roars to life. But this is not a call to despair. It is a call to arms. What if the thoughts that haunt you are not curses, but keys? What if the way through the darkness is the only way out of the cage? This is your rebellion. Step 1. The art of self-interrogation. Most people approach their 3 a.m. thoughts like trespassers, something to shoo away before they disturb the peace. But the rebel does something radical: they invite them in for tea. Try this, the why drill: when a thought like "I'm wasting my life" surfaces, don't numb it. Chase it. Ask, why does this hurt? What, specifically, feels wasted? If I weren't afraid, what would I change tomorrow? The deathbed test: project yourself to the end of your life. Ask, will the things I'm stressing about now matter then? What will I wish I'd done differently? This isn't navel-gazing, it's soul mining. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz by finding meaning in suffering. Your 3 a.m. thoughts are your Auschwitz, Will you find meaning in them, or let them break you? Step 2. The decision to own your life. Here's the brutal truth. No one is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your partner, not some future version of yourself. Freedom begins when you stop waiting for permission to live. Ask, if I continue living exactly as I am now, where will I be in 5 years? Can I live with that? Sartre was right. Man is condemned to be free. You are already choosing. Every moment you don't change is a choice to remain the same. Step 3. Making peace with your dark side. Your psyche isn't split between good and bad thoughts, it's split between acknowledged and exiled ones. Jungian therapy calls this shadow work, and it's the most subversive act you can undertake. Name your exiles. What parts of yourself do you hide? Anger? Ambition? Vulnerability? Dialogue with them. Write a letter from your shadow. Dear, your name. The truth you're avoiding is __________. Reclaim their power. Aggression isn't bad, it's boundary energy. Fear isn't weakness, it's a compass pointing to what matters. The goal isn't to fix your darkness, but to ally with it. Step 4. Small acts of defiance. Freedom isn't one grand gesture. It's seized in daily micro-revolutions. For 1 week, say no to anything that isn't a hell yes. Keep a notebook by your bed. When you wake, write uncensored. No one will ever read it. The identity shedding list roles you play, e.g., the good child, the responsible one. Burn the list. These acts reprogram your nervous system to trust yourself again. Step 5. Letting the old self die. This is the hardest part. You must grieve the person you thought you were supposed to be. The perfect life you were sold. The approval you've been chasing. The future that was never yours to begin with. This isn't loss. It's liberation. As Nietzsche wrote, you must become a chaos before giving birth to a dancing star. But there's one last layer, a truth so potent it redefines everything. What if your 3 a.m. thoughts aren't just yours? What if they're part of a larger human awakening, a collective cry for authenticity in a world of illusions? The final section doesn't just free you, it connects you to something far greater. You are not alone in your 3 a.m. vigil. Across time zones and centuries, in dim bedrooms and monastic cells, human beings have always woken to this same silent hour, not as punishment, but as initiation. The thoughts that feel like your private torment are actually ancient whispers, passed from seeker to seeker since the dawn of consciousness. Here is the ultimate truth: your darkest thoughts are not breaking you. They are remaking you. The cosmic mirror. Every spiritual tradition holds a version of this wisdom. The Buddhists call it Mara's temptation, the night the Buddha faced his demons before enlightenment. Christian mystics named it the dark night of the soul, when God feels absent so you may find him within. Jung saw it as the nigredo, the alchemical blackening where base metal turns to gold. Your 3 a.m. terror is not random. It is archetypal. You are participating in the oldest human ritual, the dissolution of illusion so truth may emerge. Consider this revelation: the thoughts you resist persist because they contain the exact medicine you need. Your fear of death? It's the universe shaking you awake to live. Your existential dread? It's your soul demanding a purpose worth suffering for. Your loneliness? It's proof you're meant for deeper connection than small talk allows. The Persian poet Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." At 3 a.m., the light doesn't knock, it breaks in. This isn't just personal, it's evolutionary. Modern neuroscience reveals something astonishing: human brains sync up during collective trauma or transformation. Your midnight despair might not be yours alone, it could be you receiving the unresolved pain of our species. The climate activist waking in panic about planetary collapse. The parent grieving a future their child may never see. The artist haunted by beauty they can't articulate. These aren't individual pathologies. They're antennae picking up signals from a world in transition. Your 3 a.m. thoughts might be the first whispers of a coming human metamorphosis. Here's how to turn leaden despair into gold. Instead of "why is this happening to me?" to ask, "what is this trying to show me?" Imagine your 80-year-old self watching this moment. What would they tell you? Let the feeling move through you, shake, cry, laugh. Energy must flow to transform. The Zen masters say, the obstacle is the path. Your midnight terror isn't blocking your freedom, it is the path to freedom. As dawn approaches, one question remains: will you betray this moment by returning to sleep, or will you let it change you forever? This is your threshold. Not just between night and day, but between the person you were and who you must become. The 3 a.m. call always comes, but few answer. Those who do discover the secret, the thoughts that felt like drowning were actually teaching you to breathe underwater. Now you know. The next time the darkness speaks, will you listen?